Welcome to our 5-minute Bible study in the book of Genesis. Our last few sessions we've been looking at the account of Noah and the flood. And I want to have a few sort of concluding thoughts about Noah before we move on to the next episode in Genesis. I want you to compare in your mind the story of Noah and the flood and the story of creation that we find in chapters 1 and chapter 2 of the book of Genesis. Now you'll recall that God had created a perfect world, but sin had entered it in Genesis 3 through the rebellion of Adam and Eve and their disobedience. Sin had corrupted all of the creation, affecting every aspect of it. And so that by the time of Noah, the thoughts of men, the inclinations of their hearts were evil all the time. But we saw the devastating consequence of sin. And then there's Noah, who found favor in the eyes of God, who was righteous. And God, through Noah, is going to save his world. But I want you to notice that the salvation is a return, as it were, to the creation story. See what I mean here? If you open Genesis chapter 1, you'll find that as God begins to create, water is covering the world. Remember, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the water. So water, which in the Bible, water, the seas represent disorder and even chaos. And so as God begins to create, you remember very early on, I think the second day, he brings the land out of the sea as a habitation for the animals and for man especially. Creates order in this world, this perfect world. When a sin, when it enters, brings disorder. God's ordered world has become disordered by sin. That's what sin does. It messes up the order of God. And what is God's response to this disorder? He returns it to a state of water, to a state of chaos. So once again, the waters cover the world. As in creation, the waters covered the earth, and God began to create. Now in the flood, again, the waters cover the earth. God washes away that disorder. And then out of the flood, he causes the waters to recede, the dry ground to appear. And through Noah, who becomes, as it were, another Adam, he says, you and your family be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, be stewards over the world. So the act of judgment is really an act of recreation. It's that emblem of salvation. Salvation is always God restoring what he created. And so we see in the story of Noah, the story of salvation, that recreation of the world. God returns the world in judgment to a state of water, chaos, and then out of that brings his order once again. And then, of course, as we noticed yesterday, into this new world, this new creation with Noah now beginning again, God introduces the covenant. He makes covenant with his people. The rainbow, of course, was the sign of the covenant, but God enters into covenant with Noah. And the covenant is going to be the dominating image for the rest of the scripture as God's plan of salvation unfolds. Makes a covenant with Noah. A little bit later, we're going to see makes a covenant with Abraham, a family. Then later on, when that family becomes a nation, he'll make a covenant through Noah with the whole of the people. And that Mosaic covenant will dominate their life as the people of God until Jesus comes, when the new covenant is established, the final covenant. But it's all about the covenant. God entered into agreement with us to form us as his people, to bring his salvation to us. And we see the beginnings of that in the story of Noah. So keep in mind, when God brings judgment, as he always does on sin, it is for the purpose of recreation. It is for the purpose of giving us a chance to be restored if we would just believe. Noah believed, and so he became the agent of salvation through the building of the ark. If we will just believe like Noah, we will come into covenant with God, and we will experience the wonder of his salvation. Live as a covenant people. Of course, your covenant is with Jesus, in Jesus. But you live in faith in the God who saves us and who restores his creation. That's what redemption, salvation, is all about. Okay, I hope you have a great day today. and I'll see you next time for our 5-minute study. Our next time together, we'll start looking at the story of the Tower of Babel and what exactly that means for us. So that'll be for our next time, though. We'll look at Babel. But for today, you just have a great day in the Lord, and I'll see you next time for our 5-minute Bible study in Genesis.